Just a heads up for anyone listening to this story. It's not necessarily terrifying because I lived through horror, but it is definitely disturbing. What happened to the families involved was truly awful, and I hope my account doesn't offend anyone. My goal isn't to disrespect the families, but to show that the world is full of monsters, and we have the power to stand up and fight back. The summer after my junior year in college, I was desperate to get out of the city. I was sick of the crowded streets, the constant noise, and the never-ending cycle of lectures and exams. When I saw an ad for a helper on a remote farm in the countryside, it seemed like the perfect escape. It was far away, but the fresh air, open fields, and the chance to clear my head sounded like a dream come true. I applied right away and got a call back within minutes. Everything happened so quickly, but it was exactly what I needed, so I accepted the offer without hesitation. Plus, it was only for 3 months. I packed my things, and 2 days later, I was at the farm's doorstep, ready to start. The property was much larger than I had imagined, with vast, unexplored fields full of trees and dense forests. I knew the farm owners were an elderly couple, but a young man greeted me instead. He might have been their grandson, but he never mentioned it. He was tall, with a sullen and distant look. He explained all the important aspects of the job and showed me where I would stay. It was a storage room in a more secluded part of the property, which was perfect for me. Exactly what I was looking for. The work was peaceful, not too demanding, and I enjoyed working outdoors with the animals. However, days went by without seeing anyone, and the job had many rules about places I couldn't go. The barn and the main house were completely off limits, and I wasn't allowed to roam freely around the farm. Even on days when I finished work early or wasn't working, I had to go straight home. I found it strange, but the work wasn't hard. I was paid relatively well, and I had plenty of time to clear my head. Another thing I appreciated at first, but then began to annoy me, was the lack of cell service on the farm. The only area where I could get a signal was near the main house. What worried me the most was not being able to reach anyone if something went wrong. My job wasn't exactly risky, but the farm was massive, and anything could happen. After 2 weeks working there, I finally saw the owners. They were both sitting on the porch with a little girl, probably their granddaughter. I knew nothing about the lives of these people I worked for, and I knew I shouldn't be observing them, but my curiosity was immense. They were both very strange, but the man was weirder than the woman, especially in his interactions with the child. Nothing too alarming, but the way he sat her on his lap and played with her hair gave me chills. I was hiding and watching this when I noticed the main gate open and a car drive in. I quickly left and went back to the house where I was staying. But that interaction genuinely disturbed me, so I decided to find out more in the coming days. Maybe by questioning the young man who worked with me the next time I saw him. It didn't take long for that to happen. A week later, he came to deliver my first paycheck and asked how the job was going. I took the opportunity to ask some questions, and, in the end, inquired about the child. Not directly, but I mentioned seeing the couple playing with their granddaughter. He visibly tensed up. Until that moment, he had been distracted, half absent, but now he was fully alert. He looked me straight in the eyes and told me to mind my own business. I became even more suspicious than before, but there was nothing I could do. I hadn't seen anything serious, just my instinct telling me something was wrong on that farm. Nothing more. After about 1 month working there, I saw the child again. She looked completely different, more withdrawn and sad. She flinched when anyone touched her, whether it was the woman or the man. Ever since I first saw them, I couldn't stop thinking about it and felt myself becoming obsessed. Something in my gut told me something was wrong, so I decided to stop ignoring my instincts. That night, I waited for everyone to fall asleep before I started to explore. I planned to visit all the off-limits areas, except for the main house. I was afraid they would catch me and accuse me of trespassing, which I knew I was. I decided that my first target would be the barn. It was relatively close to the main house, but it was around 4 a.m. and everyone was asleep. As I approached, I immediately noticed the horrible smell, like something rotten. How had I never noticed that smell before? It was absolutely horrendous. The door was padlocked, but I quickly opened it with a trick I learned in college. I wasn't prepared for what I found inside. It looked like a place in decay, old with dried red stains and flies buzzing around. Did they use this place to slaughter animals? The thought made me nauseous. But as I walked to the back, I truly panicked. A child's princess dress was stapled to the wall, and just below it, a decomposing body lay. Covered in maggots and flies, some areas were just bone. I was completely stunned, but as soon as I could move, I ran out as fast as I could. I planned to pack my things and leave the farm that night without anyone noticing. But as I was heading out, I saw a light on in one of the house's rooms. The old man was at the window, staring straight at me. After what felt like an eternity, he gave me a nod and a smile. I panicked. Did he know what was in the barn? Of course he did. All the signs from the past month pointed to everyone being in on it. And that smile and nod weren't friendly. They were downright menacing. I couldn't stay there another second. I thought about jumping the main gate, but it was huge, and they'd catch me easily on the deserted street. So I ran toward the wooded areas of the farm. I planned to hide there until I figured out a plan and could reach the nearest village. After an hour of running, I found a small crevice between two tree trunks and stopped to rest. About half an hour later, I saw some lights. They were searching for me. I panicked, certain that if they caught me, I wouldn't make it out alive. I got up and kept moving as quietly as I could. I wasn't sure exactly where I was, but if I remembered correctly, I should be getting close to one of the property's walls. I finally found it, but it was huge and had barbed wire on top. I was desperate. I didn't know how to get out of there except through the main gate, which was guarded 24/7. Then I found a small wooden door right at the property's edge. This had to be my escape, and it had to be now. Sooner or later, they would catch me, so using all my strength, I broke it open and reached the road. Then, I saw a couple driving by and threw myself in front of their car to make them stop. They were apprehensive, but I made up a story about needing to get to the nearest town quickly to get medicine. Thankfully, they didn't hesitate to let me in and drive me to town. At the police station, I reported everything I had seen, and later I learned that the farm had been a place of death for years. The news shocked the region and quickly spread to other parts of the country. Fortunately, the little girl I had seen was found alive, but clearly traumatized. She was taken to a support and rehabilitation center. I tried to distance myself as much as possible from the news circulating at the time, many of which were wildly exaggerated and some false. I felt obsessive about the story, and knew that the only way to somewhat erase what I had seen was to leave it all behind. All I know is that the farm was eventually abandoned, and, after the investigation wrapped up, it was bought by a private owner. These days, it hosts some seances and is used for dark tourism. I don't know if I'll ever get over the image of that dress. That's the part that haunts me the most, but I know I'll never set foot there again. The summer after my sophomore year of college, I desperately needed a job. Tuition fees had drained my savings, and I couldn't face another semester scraping by on instant noodles and secondhand textbooks. So, when I saw a job listing for a night security guard at an abandoned factory just outside of town, I jumped at the chance. The pay was decent, and the hours fit perfectly with my schedule. The factory, once a bustling hub of industry, had been shut down for nearly a decade. It was situated on the outskirts of a small, nearly forgotten town. The property owner wanted someone to keep an eye on the place to prevent vandalism and theft, which had become a problem recently. The job sounded easy enough. Sit in the guard booth, make rounds every couple of hours, and call the cops if I saw anything suspicious. My first night started with a brief tour from the property owner. A tall, thin man in his 60s with a permanent scowl etched into his face. He showed me around the dilapidated buildings, pointing out the key areas to watch. The factory was massive, a maze of rusting machinery, darkened hallways, and crumbling walls. As we walked, I started feeling uneasy about this night job, but I brushed it off as first-day jitters. "Just stay in the guard booth unless you hear something," he advised. "If you see anyone, don't confront them. Just call the police." I nodded, trying to hide my nervousness. As the sun set, casting long shadows over the deserted factory, I settled into the guard booth, a small, stuffy room with a desk, a chair, and an old black and white TV monitor displaying various parts of the factory grounds. The first few nights were uneventful. The factory was eerily silent, the only sounds coming from the occasional rustle of leaves. I spent my time reading, watching TV, and checking the monitors. I started to feel more confident, convincing myself that nothing bad was going to happen and that my initial apprehension was unfounded. I made my rounds as instructed, walking through the dark, empty corridors with a flashlight, the beam cutting through the thick darkness. These were the moments I liked least, but I got through them quickly. One night, around 2 a.m., I was on my second round when I heard it. A faint, strange tapping sound. I stopped, listening intently. The sound was coming from one of the old assembly lines, so I followed the noise. As I got closer, the sound became more distinct. I turned a corner and saw a figure crouched over one of the machines, tapping away with a metal tool. My flashlight beam caught him, and he froze, slowly turning to face me. It was a man, middle-aged, with a wild look in his eyes. His clothes were dirty and torn, and he held a wrench in his hand. I can't quite describe how I felt. It was like having a mini heart attack. But within seconds, my body reacted, and I bolted out of there, sprinting back to the guard booth. I slammed the door shut and barricaded it with a chair. I immediately called the police, who assured me they'd be there soon. They really didn't take long, but it felt like an eternity. I'm sure we've all experienced that distorted perception of time when we're terrified. When the officers arrived, they searched the factory but found no sign of the man. They combed through the place thoroughly, but he had vanished. They took my statement and advised me to be extra vigilant, but there wasn't any amount of money that would make me do rounds the next few nights. That man had chilled me to the bone. He didn't seem like a homeless person looking for a place to crash. He radiated malice. I can't explain it well. It was just something I felt at the time. I called my boss and explained everything. He was super understanding and supported my idea of staying in the guard booth for the next few days. He also promised to get me a colleague to do rounds with me later that week. I felt much better, not knowing how fleeting that feeling would be. Over the next few nights, I found evidence of someone being in the factory, footprints in the dust, tools that had been moved, and once a half-eaten sandwich left on a workbench. I knew the man was still around, and it made my job infinitely more stressful. Every creak, every distant sound set my nerves on edge. One particularly hot and humid night, I was just starting my shift when I heard a scream. It was definitely a woman's scream. I had a bad feeling about this, but I couldn't ignore it. I quickly called the police and then followed the sound, each step feeling heavier than the last. I headed straight to where I'd seen the man before. At the end of the corridor, I pushed open a door and saw the man from before, but this time he wasn't alone. He was with a young girl, probably no older than 12. She was tied to a chair, her face streaked with tears. The man stood over her, holding a knife. I must have caught him completely off guard because he dropped the knife in surprise, and I managed to shove him against the wall. Fueled by adrenaline, I pushed harder than I intended, and he hit his head, losing consciousness. I panicked, thinking I might have killed him, so I quickly checked his pulse and was relieved to find he was still alive. Then I untied the girl and explained that the police were on their way. Later, I found out the man was a former worker at the factory who had sinister behavior towards female workers, leading to his dismissal. The girl he had kidnapped was the daughter of the man who had fired him. I don't know what his plan was or why he did something like that 10 years after being fired, and honestly, I don't want to know. I just know I won't be working in such places anytime soon, especially not on the night shift.